Hello artists, so today I'm going to be going through the sketchbooks that I submitted for my portfolio for the Royal Drawing School's postgraduate course, the drawing year, which I am on now. Check out my blog to get an update of what I'm up to every week. But I'm first going to go through the two sketchbooks that were actually in my portfolio and then cover the other ones I brought along to the interview with me as well. So this that you are seeing here is like my observational sketchbook. So you can see I'm using kind of ink, pen, I have notes, Minecraft reference. This was in the class World Imagery, and it was some kind of a mask and it reminded me of a villager. So I have all of these kinds of weird cross-referencing going on as well. These are Monet studies in Biro. These are life drawing studies in ink, more life drawing studies. So what I do in class is if I get a bit bored of drawing on larger paper, I will turn to my sketchbook to do quicker studies and then go back to the pieces. It helps me concentrate for longer. Piero della Francesca study, an imaginative landscape. Yeah, I quite like using ink on this paper. I think this was I think it's an Artway sketchbook from Amazon that I got. More model studies from class. Another Monet study. Okay, now we're going to be moving on to the V&A, which was the Buddhism section that we studied at one point. So this was all in the Buddhism section at the V&A. All done in I think this was more of a loose ink. This was Vagabond. I'm a big fan of manga and anime. So yeah, my first anime was Bleach when I was 16 years old, I think. And then since then, I've just been hooked to mostly reading lots of different manga. But then if there's like a really cool scene I want to see animated, I go see anime and watch it too. So this is Edward Hopper, life model study. Another Vagabond study, because Inoue, the author of Vagabond, he's just a master when it comes to ink. All right, so here's me attempting to understand the language of mark making a bit better. This was, I believe I was looking at Van Gogh in ink studies and seeing all the different marks he used to like construct his studies and landscapes and so on. So I kind of recorded some of those marks here so I could kind of go back and reference if I needed to. More kind of life model hand studies. This was at the V&A. This is Raphael's, the room is called Raphael's Cartoons, I think. And it's one of the most spacious rooms in the V&A. Very, very nice room. I would advise going there if you haven't visited the V&A already. It's a wonderful space. These are pencil studies, more from the V&A, from the same room. I'm hoping that this is kind of clear enough and the focus has got this. But yeah, more studies from the Raphael's Cartoon room. If you're wondering why I guess I chose to draw in a lot of ink in this sketchbook is, I guess my kind of intention behind it was I don't want to rework things too much. So, because if I'm working in pencil, sometimes it's too easy to just continue, adjust, and maybe you're less careful with your marks. I find that I'm very careful with my marks when it comes to ink and pen, so I don't know if my brain works better, but now, to be honest, I've gone back to working in pencil because I felt like I couldn't use pencil too well. So I'll show some of my pencil studies, I'm sure, at a later point. But these are Street Fighter studies. It was actually from a World Imagery class at the Royal Drawing School during the intensive. Now I'm looking at kind of, yeah, Van Gogh's mark making again. And I'm using some of his mark making to do kind of life model studies too. This was a Van Gogh study, once again in ink. Matthew Wong, an Edo study. I'm not too familiar with this artist. I can't remember where I picked up this image from. Aha, so this was one of the lessons we visited, storyboarding. And Richard Ikide at the Royal Drawing School saying basically that storyboard artists are underrated. And I was looking up the storyboarding of Spirited Away, and it was just so stunning to see the drawings of Miyazaki. So I studied a couple of them. So pattern study in pen. This was once again at the V&A, Michelangelo's sculptures at the V&A. This was the V&A, I believe they have a sculpture room, and I'm kind of constructing some of my own landscapes and imagery from the different sculptures. And I also liked studying the space too. I really like some of my space drawings in the sketchbook. It was quite a headache, but really rewarding to kind of sit down and draw the space, because there's just so much going on in some of these London museums. So this is the comic book artist Mobius. Once again, V&A, this time looking at a John Constable. This was a Turner that I saw in pencil, and I'm pretty sure this was still part of a painting at the V&A. Once again, a V&A space study. You can see here just me flicking back to my sketchbook during lesson, trying to use some mark making to describe different backgrounds in space. Another V&A space study, V&A. I think these are in the main corridor when you walk in. More V&A, but this time I'm looking at studying the sculptures from different angles, and also here constructing my own kind of imaginary landscape, more kind of imaginary composition. So this was influenced by my Mobius drawings that I did previously when it came to like mark making and maybe the style I approached creating this image with. This was from the Japanese section, and of course it reminded me of No Face from Spirited Away. So I just kind of put those together there. And this was in the British Museum, I believe. So it says Anatolia, pointed bronze helmets. Can't remember exactly where this was. This might have been downstairs where there's a lot of kind of ceramics, and this was in the Petrie Museum. That was nearby the British Museum, I believe. Just doing some basic studies, and then I have I really like this actually. I saw this engraved on. I can't remember what I saw it engraved on, but I just really like the shape of the monkey. So these were some smaller objects in the Petrie Museum that I did some more detailed studies on. I really just quite like the placement, just the clean, and done with a mechanical pencil. So one of the weeks at the V&A we studied costumes. So this is in like the theatre room, which you probably would never know even existed unless you intentionally like go and find it. I feel like the V&A, every week we went, it's just like more and more places just opened up. And I really like the V&A as a space. So these were the costume studies. And this is Medieval Europe space study. This was one of my favorite rooms. So we had another lesson in a different area, and then towards the end of the day I actually came back to this area to draw this area because I just really like the space. more kind of ink experimentation. And yeah, once again, trying to work out some vocabulary when it comes to mark making. And I think we are close to the end now. These are for you. Oh yeah, we got some nice pencil hand studies here. And I believe that's it for this one. So let's move on to some color. So for color, I love to use gouache in Sketchbook. I'm gonna quickly flick through this first. Colored gouache, because this was like my very first time using gouache. So there's a lot of kind of experimental pieces in this sketchbook. This was the one I brought along to the interview. This was not the one I submitted because it was a bit more experimental and me learning the medium a little bit. So some of this imagery is inspired by the story of the Monkey King, Journey to the West. Sometimes just looking at random landscapes or images I find from the internet. I was just trying to get the gist of how I can use gouache as a medium. I much prefer it to acrylic, and I much prefer it to watercolor because it's just much easier to control than watercolor, and it doesn't feel as plastic as acrylic. It has this really nice kind of matte finish that I think works very well on this, inside of this moleskin sketchbook. This is where I start to kind of get the hang of the medium a little bit, start producing some, I guess, mythologically inspired compositions and doing some flower studies. And once again, you can see like the mark making that I kind of studied in the observational sketchbook is showing up also in the gouache pieces, because I just want to, I guess, develop that kind of language across different mediums. Yeah, so as you can see, some things work, some things don't, some things maybe look a bit plastic, some things look better. Some of these color schemes I'm taking from like famous artists such as Alex Katz, maybe some Instagram references that I found or bookmarked over time. Sometimes I'll leave notes to kind of maybe create connections. And yeah, let's move on to, this is the gouache sketchbook that I submitted in my actual portfolio. And you can see I've actually redone some pieces in this one because I thought some pieces really worked well in the first one. So I wanted them in like my submitted sketchbook. But then I also have a lot of kind of new stuff in here too. So this is, once I get the hang of the medium a little bit, I've got some fairly interesting images in here. A lot of these don't make it to necessarily oil paint, but that's like my intention behind doing the gouaches, so I can work out color schemes, work out compositions, kind of mess up if I need to. So then when it comes to me doing an actual oil painting, I have a better plan of what I'm going into and how I might go about painting it. Because I feel like it's a myth of like this whole idea of an artist having this blank canvas in front of them and you're supposed to draw out some spooky inspiration from, like, look, this just doesn't work. It's just, there's some horrible pieces in it, but it's all beneficial at the end of the day. I really like this one. I think this was inspired by Edvard Munch, one of his color schemes. And some pieces, when they just don't work, I guess I just go over it and have a interesting background to work on top of later on. This, I believe, was a Sorolla study, possibly. I like the glow in the middle of this hand. And you can see like some things I go back to, I leave, I prepare, don't go back to. So it's just this kind of constant back and forth, I guess. I really like this one. I really like this shape. If you haven't noticed, a lot of the things I show tend to involve this kind of doorway shape or windows, and that's it for that one. And finally, I'm just going to show you a couple from another new kind of gouache sketchbook I'm doing. I don't think you'll be able to see these pencil compositions clearly, but this is like inspired by bleach, the kimonos in bleach, the clothing, more kind of composition drafts that I haven't gouached in yet. These are initial landscapey gouache experiments. Mixing ink with gouache, I don't think it worked that well. Shiny versus matte, I'm not really feeling it. Once again, experimenting with ink a little bit. Monkey King stuck in a pot. More ink, but this time I primed it. I don't think it worked that well. And I'm gonna end on this double page because I hope you enjoyed my sketchbook tour, but I am documenting what I'm doing each week on the Raw Drawing School. I've actually started a blog now, and I'm doing kind of like a weekly article summarizing all the valuable lessons I've learned for the week. Do check out my website, and thanks for watching the video. Here is my goal. Don't forget to subscribe. I did like 4 sketchbooks, man. Please subscribe. But here is my awkward goodbye.